Okay, this is going to be brief. I know, I've said it before, but I always try. Now, the last one was very brief. You have to admit that. That's the one where I sang that song off key. So, yeah, I heard that. Now, those of you who are hypercritical, and that's most of you, will note that the pink damn Christmas tree is still out. Look, that's not my fault. Okay, every time I try to take it down, my dog Francois Pierre, who for some reason loves that tree, goes after me. Okay, I've had to go in for throat surgery 4 days last week because I was trying to take that tree down. So I'm doing my part. If you have a problem with this, send some cards and letters to Francois Pierre. All right. Anyway, I'm gonna take it down before I do another podcast. I promise that from the bottom of my black little heart. I make that promise to you, my loyal viewers. And since there aren't that many of you, I'm not lying to that many people. What? Oh, come on, give me a break, will you? I'm doing the best I can. I'm officially an old man now. That's right. I don't look it because I still party down. All right, enough about me. So, this is for lawyers, really. So I'm gonna complain, bitch and moan, etc. about a few things that I keep hearing all the time, including, briefly, what I heard, and I may go into it in more detail later. But I listened to the broadcast arguments regarding the kicking Trump off the ballot, in particular the decision made in Colorado. So, but just three ones that bug the hell out of me. And it doesn't hurt those of you who aren't lawyers to be literate. If you listen to the media, you won't be. So, number one, I think I've discussed this previously in another great podcast, is there's no such thing as opening arguments. So anytime you hear some talking head talk about opening arguments in a case, I want you to immediately throw a heavy object at your television. And if that doesn't work, just take the damn thing down and give it to the garbage man, because it will have been forever polluted and ruined in that regard. So, you do opening statements where you have an outline where you say the evidence will show this, the evidence will show that. Arguments are closing. So, if you are arguing in your opening statements, the other side can object, and you don't want the first thing that happens, the first impression the jury has of you is that you try to say something and the judge said, no, that's wrong and you can't be doing it. It's not a good look. So that's the first thing, is opening statements, closing arguments. So you'll be literate. The second thing is, and this one drives me nuts, how many times have you heard some talking head say, today the jury ordered Donald Trump to pay $80-some million to Jean Carroll. Jean Carroll. Jurors, of course, they don't order anybody to pay anything unless it's a fine levied by the court, for example, a discovery violation or something of that nature. If it's a verdict for damages, they're not ordered to do anything. You get a judgment, and then you have to go find the property, sell it, do whatever you can. The marshal go down and put a chain on the business or whatever. So it's not an order. You still have lots of work to do. Just because you have a judgment doesn't mean you're going to put money in your pocket. So no orders to you to pay a jury verdict. That is not how the system works. Third, if Trump wants to take an appeal, or anybody wants to take an appeal of a federal court decision, they have to post a bond. Well, they don't have to post a bond. If they don't post a bond, it means that somebody can go find their property, sell it, do whatever they can, and collect that way. If you post a cash bond or a supersedious bond for the full amount, so that if somebody wins, they can just go grab that bond and put it in their pocket, then you can stay the enforcement of the judgment until the appeals have run their course. So no requirement, at least in federal court, that you have to post a bond to take an appeal. So that's wrong. Finally, I'm just going to touch briefly on the arguments that I heard in the Supreme Court. I was very disappointed in these justices because they kept saying over and over again, well, if we do this, you're going to get that result. If you get this, you can have a problem with every different state will come up with its own different decisions, and then you're going to have one state stopping the whole election process and so on. And isn't that something that's undesirable? You interpreted the Constitution. It doesn't matter whether it's desirable or not. That was a problem for the people who wrote it. And if it's going to have an undesirable effect, well, then they probably shouldn't have written it, but they did. And it's your responsibility, justices of the Supreme Court, not to determine whether you would like the result of enforcing the Constitution, but just you have to enforce the Constitution as it is written. And it was written by people who succeeded in getting this passed as an amendment to the Constitution, which is not easy to do. So you can't throw that out because you don't like the results. You're required, if you're being honest about it, to say, I think the results here could be horrendous, but it's not up to me, the court. I'm not a legislature. I don't get the right to rewrite the Constitution to prevent a result that I don't want. And finally, I had one of the justices say, well, at the time this was written, the big concern was they didn't want the Confederate States to have all this extra power where they could go back and effectively continue to oppress black people. And I had to take a break from that one. And I sent my dog out to get some tequila so it could help my nerves. I was very upset. And he drank all the damn tequila and kept the change. Don't ever get a French bulldog for a pet. Or if you are, don't send it to the liquor store. I made that mistake more than one time. And I let him take my car. It's a big mistake. You ever seen a French bulldog try to drive a car with put their little paws up there on the wheel and they're doing this and moving their little body around? It's enough to make your blood run cold. But my blood was already running cold from what that justice said. And this was this African-American justice that Biden had just put on the court. And, of course, the Republicans on that said, yeah, me too. So the problem with that is that there's no legislative history to that effect. So what's legislative history? Keep that term in mind. If I'm trying to interpret, and I'm on a court, and there's a statute, federal statute, and I look at that statute and I say, well, it isn't quite clear to me what that means, but let me see if there's legislative history. And then you look at the hearings, you listen to what various senators or congressmen or even witnesses said at the time they were passing this thing, and they say, okay, this is history in the legislature. And the history in the legislature helps clarify what they were trying to do and what that meant. So that's legislative history, and that's legitimate. This is first-year law school, folks. To look at if there's an ambiguity, only if there's an ambiguity, to look at the legislative history to see what the Senate and the House and maybe even the President intended by the constitutional amendment or the statute that they wrote. If you don't have that, you can't say, well, the general history of the times. There's no provision for using general history in place of legislative history. Those are two very separate, distinct terms, and this woman was talking about general history and acting as though it was the same as legislative history. So I don't care what the result is. I think probably would be a pretty horrendous result if in every state or any individual state could keep a presidential candidate off. And there were some other arguments that I thought were fairly valid in terms of in Trump's favor. But these particular arguments and issues were just, it's freshman law school, folks. So that's it. I told you I'd make this one short. And I think I did. If that is, it's short if I shut up now. But what if I don't? And you are mesmerized, so you can't get away. And I could just stay here and talk forever. As Judy said, Ed never has trouble talking. So, but guess what? I'm exhausted. I just got back from California. We had a week's worth of depositions. I saw lots of old friends there. It was a very nice trip for me, even though I was working. I'm not fond of working. But I was fond of seeing old friends, and it was it was really great from that perspective. Not that you care, unless you happen to be one of those old friends and you're watching this, in which case I salute you and I thank you. And now I just have one word to say, and that's good night.